Hi, AP friends. We are diving headfirst into photosynthesis today. So I have a little bit of a warm-up question for you, but I'm going to make this one an extra credit. So if you want to take a stab at this and email me your answer today, it has to be in by midnight tonight, Wednesday, December the 9th, then I will give you a few points extra credit if you get it right. So tell me what you think there. So let's go ahead and start with photosynthesis. So I want to first remind you of the equation for photosynthesis. So remember, it is backwards from cellular respiration. So in photosynthesis, plants have to have carbon dioxide. They also have to have water. And they are going to produce sugars and oxygen. Okay, so that's the equation for photosynthesis. So remember, photosynthesis is only occurs in plant cells. Plant cells are only going to be eukaryotic cells. So plant cells are considered, or plants are considered to be autotrophs. Now this is important. We have two classes of organisms in living things, and they are autotrophs or heterotrophs. In middle school, you probably called them producers. Autotrophs would be the producers, or consumers. Heterotrophs would be the consumers. So autotrophs mean they make their own energy. Troph comes from the word trophic, and a trophic level is like an energy level. We'll talk about those more in our ecology unit in the spring. So autotrophs make their own energy. Heterotrophs use energy from other organisms. They don't necessarily make their own energy. So let's jump into photosynthesis. So photosynthesis happens in the plants, and specifically in the plant cell, it happens in the organelle called the chloroplast. Okay? So if you remember the structure of the chloroplast, you probably don't, and that's okay. The chloroplast is made up of these discs, and these discs are called thylakoids. And if you have a stack of the discs, the stack is called a granum, or plural would be grana. Okay, singular would be granum, plural would be grana. Okay. So in living systems, the basic unit of structure and function is a cell. Cells organize into tissues. Tissues organize into organs, and organs organize into organ systems. That's kind of how we think of it in humans. Cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. And you've probably heard that hierarchy before or are familiar with it. And so it's mostly the same in plants, except there's not really organ systems. So we have our cell. Here's our cell. It groups in tissues. So the tissue here that photosynthesis happens in is called the mesophyll. It's inside the leaf, and that's the tissues that have the most chloroplast in the mesophyll. And the organ that's in is the leaf. Okay, so we have our mesophyll cell in the tissue, the mesophyll tissue, and then in the organ of the leaf. So in the plant, the only part that actually does photosynthesis is the leaf, not the root or the stalk or the trunk or the flower, or any of that part, just the leaf. Okay. So that's where the chloroplasts are found, in the leaf, in the mesophyll tissue. So also important in the plant are the stomata. And if we were in class, we would look at the stomata under the microscope. So if you take a leaf, or even if you take, you could take a leaf off of a tree, or even if you take spinach, I often do it with spinach. And you take a piece of tape, or sometimes I will use like clear fingernail polish and paint it on the back of the stomata and just kind of let it dry for a minute or two, and then peel it off. You will be able to pick up a thin layer of those leaf cells. And then you can look at it under the microscopes and you can see these stomata. And so they are pores that open and close. And they are important because they allow for the exchange of gases. Okay, so microscopic pores, we can see them under the microscope, that allow for the exchange of CO2 and O2 in and out of the cell. Okay, and those are on the underside of the leaf. So you kind of see them here in the bottom of the cell, and that's kind of why this is showing that leaf flipped over there. Okay. Now, also in this mesophyll tissue, we have veins. So just like in your body, you have veins that carry your blood, and that blood carries all your nutrients and your oxygen and your carbon dioxide and all of the different things, your sugars to and from and around your body. Veins do that in plants. Now I know you probably think of roots, and roots pull that up from the ground into like in the trunk of a tree or in a flower. They pull that up from the ground, but roots don't really go all throughout the structure of the plant. And so what you have instead, and even in the roots, are these veins. And so the veins in the plant are called the xylem and the phloem. Okay, so the xylem is responsible for transporting water in the plant. The phloem transports carbs, or more specifically, I guess, sugars, such as the sugar glucose in the plant. And so that's how these things are moved throughout the system, through the plant, in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so in photosynthesis, if I can get to my next slide, maybe. I don't want you to focus too much on this part here, this extra water, so you can kind of just ignore that for right now. This is showing water as a product, and I don't really like that because there's 12 waters here. This says only 6. So you see, really, there's not any extra produced because there's more than that being used. So I don't really like to think so much of water as a product. But what I do want you to know, what I want you to get from this slide, is that the O2, that's the product of photosynthesis that's given off, comes from water, okay? Not from CO2. Sometimes people want to think it comes from carbon dioxide. It's just easy to think that because carbon dioxide is a gas, O2 is a gas. All you have to do is knock off that carbon and you got oxygen. But that is incorrect, okay? So what I want you to gather from this slide here is that the oxygen in photosynthesis is actually coming from water. Okay, now this slide is critical. So if you know this slide in photosynthesis, you honestly can answer the bulk of the questions on the test about photosynthesis. If you truly understand this slide and can follow the arrows, this is the best almost diagram that I can give you. Okay. So photosynthesis happens there are 2 basic steps, or 2 major processes that occur in photosynthesis. The light reactions, okay, which also include an electron transport chain. And you will see that's very, very similar to the electron transport chain that we have in cellular respiration. And then the Calvin cycle, which is sometimes referred to as the dark reactions, okay? But it's also called the Calvin cycle, named after Melvin Calvin, who founded it in like 1940 or something. So in the light reactions, what happens is water is brought in from the plant through the tissues, through the root, right? And it is broken down into oxygen. Oxygen is released as a byproduct, okay? That is the job of the light reactions. In the dark reaction, carbon dioxide is brought in through the stomata, right? Through those pores on the underside of the leaf. And it is fixed. This process is called carbon fixation. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. To form a sugar, okay? CH2O, specifically glucose, but CH2O is the basic formula for a sugar. And so that is really the job of these 2 parts of the cycle. The light reactions require light, so they must have light to proceed. Okay, now I will say the dark reactions don't have to have light, but they work independent of light. Okay, they don't have to, I'm not sure what I said. They don't have to be in the dark. Dark reactions can happen in the dark or in the light. Okay, but light reactions must have light, and that light's obviously coming from the sunlight. Okay, the light reactions you'll see here are happening in the thylakoid. And then the dark reactions are just out here happening in this, we're still in the chloroplast, okay? This is our double membrane chloroplast structure that you see here. But this is kind of like the cytoplasm, so to speak, of the chloroplast, just the empty space in the chloroplast. And it is called the stroma. And that's an important term. So the dark reactions happen in the stroma of the chloroplast, light reactions in the thylakoid. Okay, now just as in cellular respiration, photosynthesis is a series of redox reactions, oxidation and reduction reactions. And so in in cellular respiration, we were breaking down glucose, right? And taking those electrons, carrying them to the electron transport chain, and through some electron carriers, NADH and FADH2, and using them to make ATP. And this process is very, very similar, but we have a little bit of a different electron carrier. We have a molecule called NADP+. Instead of NAD+. We have that P, and that makes me think photosynthesis, and that's how I can always keep it straight, right? Because it's got that P, because it happens in photosynthesis. And so NADP is the electron carrier that picks up the electrons in the light reaction and forms NADPH, okay? It also picks up a phosphate and forms ATP, okay? And so in this, just like as glucose is broken down in cellular respiration, water is broken down here. And when water is broken down, we've got those hydrogens that are going to be popped onto NADP to make NADPH, and those electrons are going to be used to drive the electron transport chain, okay, just like they did in cellular respiration, to generate ATP using that same enzyme, ATP synthase, okay? And we will talk about the light reactions and walk through that more specifically tomorrow. Today we're kind of discussing big picture, all right? O2 is released as a byproduct. These two are our products for cellular respiration, okay? These two up here are our reactants for cellular respiration, all right? And so you see here this ATP and this NADPH gets recycled. That energy is used in the Calvin cycle to be able to build these sugars, this glucose, okay? And what's that glucose used for? Well, these sugars or this glucose is used structurally in the plant. Okay, it makes up the structure of the plant. It helps the plant to store nutrients. And so that's really important in being able to build and grow the plant. Just like it is for us, right? We use it for energy, for building and growth and storage and those types of things. Plants do as well. Okay? So, very, very important diagram here. Okay? So the light reactions, just to walk back through, solar energy is captured by the chlorophyll. Remember, that's the pigment in the thylakoids, and converted into chemical energy, namely ATP and NADPH. Now, in cellular respiration, we had processes known as substrate level phosphorylation and oxidative phosphorylation. In photosynthesis, the phosphorylation that occurs is called photophosphorylation. And that's because the energy that's required to make those ATP molecules and make that NADPH is coming through from the light, hence the photo part is coming from the light. To phosphorylate, it's using the energy from the light that is harnessed in the electron transport chain. Okay. And in the dark reactions, or the Calvin cycle, chemical energy is used to make organic compounds of food, such as glucose, and this happens in the stroma, as we mentioned. Okay, there's that term carbon fixation that I just spoke about, where carbon dioxide, which came from the air in through the stomata, are combined with molecules present in the chloroplast to form organic molecules and are reduced to carbohydrates or sugars, okay, with the energy or the electron carrier NADPH. All right, so that is all I want to touch on today with photosynthesis. That should have been pretty quick and easy. If you all have any questions on it, let me know. If not, I believe you have a Model 1 on the photosynthesis worksheet to begin on today. And you all have a great day. Bye.